Year 5. I thought I'd make a video for you about what we've been doing in art lessons, because sadly lots of us didn't get to finish our human sculptures. So I thought I'd remind you of the things that we've been doing in case you want to have a go at doing it at home. We've been looking at an artist called Alberto Giacometti, and just as a brief recap, we started by looking at some of his sketches of the human form. Let's have a little look at what we saw before. So after we looked at this, we thought to ourselves, are these portraits detailed? We thought about how had he drawn them and what had he concentrated on? And we decided that the portraits were not detailed, they were just sketches, they were just outlines of shapes. We thought maybe he'd drawn them by repeating some of his circles and getting the shapes right by continuous strokes, lots of different strokes. And we thought he didn't really concentrate on the details, but he just concentrated on the shapes. So if you want to make a human sculpture at home, you could have a go at doing some of the drawings that we did in class, just to remind yourself of the proportions and the shapes of the human body. You could look at someone in your house and get them to pose for you, like we did in class, or you could use a little human model if you have one of those artist models. We need to think about this word proportion. We talked about this before, but just a reminder, proportion means the size of one thing compared to the size of another thing. So if we used it in a sentence, we could say, the monster's arms trailed on the ground out of all proportion to its minuscule head. So if we're thinking about a normal human body, we need to think of the correct proportions. We talked about the places we have joints. We have a joint there, so our head can pivot around. We have shoulder joints, elbow joints, wrist joints. We talked about our waist, we talked about our hips, our knees, our ankles. So these are the places where we need to think of our body bending. And in terms of proportions, we decided that our arm span, if we turned ourselves on our side, our arm span was actually the same height as our entire body from head to toe, which is a weird fact, but something that we need to bear in mind, unless we want to draw little models of people that have T-Rex tiny arms. So we need to remember that if our arms were hanging down by our sides, they come almost to our knees. Our legs are longer sometimes than we think, so we don't want to draw tiny little stick legs on the bottom. We want to make sure that our legs are long enough. So when you're doing your sketching at home, please remember to always draw lightly so that you can change your drawings. We don't want to just settle with the first one we did if we know it's not quite right. We want to change it. So draw lightly and play around with some sketches first to help you get the idea of what the body looks like. After we've done our sketches and we feel confident about the shape of the human body, we then need to start constructing our sculpture out of 3D materials. We had a look at some of Alberto Giacometti's sculptures. He said the object of art is not to reproduce reality exactly as it is, but to create a reality of the same intensity. And if we have a look at his sculptures here, we can notice some very distinct things about them. I love what it says here, that Alberto Giacometti became famous for his elongated figures, whose overworked surfaces appeared like trees in winter that had lost their leaves. Wow, I just think that is such an expressive sentence, and it's also very poignant for now, because that's exactly what all the trees are doing right now. In fact, we might even feel a bit like that ourselves with this lockdown. I feel a bit like a tree that has lost all its leaves. So when we're making our human sculptures, we can think of that. They're sort of elongated shadow-like creatures. So that is good news for us, because it means we don't have to work too hard to make our figures really wide. We can let them be thin, which is actually easier for us. At school, we had these materials. We had thick aluminium wire here and some thinner wires, or actually pipe cleaners we used. We had sellotape, we had masking tape and scissors and wire cutters, as well as paper. Now, I realise at home that you might not have all those things. However, you might, if you don't have the thick aluminium wire, you might be able to get hold of some thinner wire like this, which is like gardening wire or florist wire. You might be able to get hold of some thicker gardening wire that is a little bit more like this. You might even, with some adults' help, be able to cut open, maybe with a pair of pliers, a coat hanger, so that you can use the thicker wire. Because what we need to do first is to construct our human figure in a basic way, like this top picture here, which is just a basic frame of wire. Now, we could just have one long line for the backbone, or we could make a triangular shape, which is a little bit more like the human form. So when you've decided, when you've cut your pieces of wire and you've joined them together, either using masking tape or sellotape or even gaffer tape, any kind of tape that you have at home, then we need to start fleshing them out a little bit, a bit more like this one here. But when we were at school, we did it a bit more like this. We scrunched up paper, and you could use any paper at home, and we covered over our body with scrunched up tissue paper, and then we pinned it down by using pipe cleaners to make it really tight. Or you could use sellotape, anything, even string, anything, just to squish the paper down so that it goes along the shape of the human form that you have made. My man here is very relaxed. He's lying down and looking at the stars. So we're going to talk a bit about posture later, but at the moment we're just thinking about fleshing out our sculpture. Our next step after we have fleshed out our sculpture is to add some glue and some paper to make our structure a bit more solid. So let's have a look at some of you guys doing that. Ethan, can you tell me what's the name of the artist who inspired our work?
Alberto Giacometti, and his sculptures are made up of long and slender creatures or humans, and they're in different postures.
Lovely. So it's at this point, after we've done one layer of paper and glue, that we really need to start thinking about this word posture. We said it is the position in which someone holds their body. So obviously that's really important when we're thinking about making sculptures of the human body. We need to think, what position do we want our human sculpture to be in? We need to manipulate the body into that position. You can play around with it. You can have any position you want, but you need to do that before the sculpture completely hardens with the PVA glue that you're using. Because once it's really hard, then you'll find it very hard to bend it into the shape you want. So, like I said, after one layer of paper and glue, then move it into the position that you want, and then after that you will need to keep on adding the paper and glue, and then just let it dry in the position that you've chosen. So girls, can you tell me, how are you making your models strong?
By winding the paper on tightly, putting a lot of paper on and a lot of glue, so when the glue dries it will go really hard.
Brilliant, thank you. Anything
And then
to add,
you want
Olivia?
to squeeze it so it all forms properly.
Fantastic.